Something watched me from my closet when I was 12, and I still think about it. I think this falls under the category of kindertrauma. So today, let's talk a little bit about this story from r/paranormal and touch a little bit on kindertrauma, which is a topic that I love. It's all about the things that scared us as kids and how we can confront them. So today on Phantom Astronaut, all about kindertrauma. Let's take a quick look on Reddit. It says, something watched me from my closet when I was 12, and I still think about it. So, this person says, this happened over 10 years ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. I've only ever told one person because I know how crazy it sounds, but maybe someone here can help me make sense of it. When I was around 12, I went through this place where I was terrified of my closet. Not in a, I watched too many scary movies kind of way. It was something different. I'd always kept my closet door open a little because I didn't like the creaky noise it made when I shut it completely, but for a few weeks, every single night around 3 a.m., I would wake up and just know something was in there. I never actually saw anything at first. It was just this overwhelming feeling of being watched, like something was staring straight at me from the dark. I'd freeze and stare at the gap in the closet door, heart pounding, too scared to even move. It felt intelligent, like whatever it was, I was scared and liked it. Excuse me, whatever it was, I knew I was scared and I liked it. One night, I finally got brave and sat up in bed to shut the door, and that's when I saw it. There was a figure crouched in the bottom of the closet. It wasn't a shadow or trick of the light, it was a shape. Not like a person, but smaller. It was pale, and its eyes were open wider than I've ever seen on a human, just staring, not blinking. I slammed the door and screamed. My parents ran in, and of course, there was nothing there by the time they checked. They said I had a nightmare, but I know what I saw. I stopped sleeping in the room after that, and to this day, I will never sleep with an open closet door. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was something paranormal or something else entirely, but it was real to me. I can still see those eyes when I think about it. Has anyone experienced anything even remotely like this? Please tell me I'm not alone. Okay, so uh, you're not alone. I've experienced things like this. And I think everybody has this common connection of sleeping with your feet on the mattress and covered, because there's that meme about how, like, if you have your feet off of the mattress or uncovered, then some kind of a ethereal hand is going to come up and grab you, right? Like, all these things are maybe part of like a mono myth that we all live with. I'm not sure if it's part of our, so-called lizard brain, the primordial programming that helps us to navigate the world and escape danger, our pattern recognition, threat assessment, all of those kinds of things that are, hard neuroscience. I don't know. But I do know that there's a lot of commonalities. We talk about monsters in the closet. And this is a monster in the closet, a boogeyman, a ghoul. Um, this is something that's very, very common, and it's also tied to a fear of the dark. So when we have a fear of the dark, it's really a fear of loss of perception. One of the things that I'm a little bit afraid of, despite the fact that I enjoy going in the ocean and do confront a lot of fears, I think that there's something unnatural about being in the ocean. We are no longer adapted evolutionarily to be in the ocean. So I'm a little bit more afraid of ocean predators than I am terrestrial predators, because I just know that I'm going to have a more difficult time both assessing where they are and potentially finding a way to safely either coexist or escape if I have to. Just because it's so disorienting, they can be coming along the z-axis or whatever, from the bottom, above you, wherever, and it's going to be much, much more difficult. We're not adapted any longer for life in the sea. In the same way, when you experience, life in the light, especially since the creation of electrical lighting, we have a tendency to feel that anything that happens in the dark happens in a realm in which we lose a sense of control. So the closet is another element of that. It's a separate room, it's a space where we don't normally go. It feels like we're trespassing when we enter it. So therefore, there's a monster in the closet kind of sensibility. Now, couple that with the active imagination that you have when you're a child. There's some theories that are out there, like the Bicambrian mind, which says that, or excuse me, the bicameral mind, where children experience invisible friends potentially because our internal monologue is split into a an experiential person and an observant person in our mind until they integrate neurologically at a certain age. That's a theory you can check out called bicameral mind theory. Now, if that's the case, then we may invent people, entities, other things that are sharing the space with us, and we may perceive them as real because mentally they may be real to us. Um, I don't know if that completely explains why we have this monster in the closet kind of phenomenon, why we have things like fear of the dark. It's just part of this big stew of different things that humans have roiling around in their subconscious because we are complicated beings. Well, all that said, um, I remember I was probably about 5 or 6, and I was sitting at. I had one of these chairs that had like a little desk on it, and I would draw a lot as a kid. Um, my father was an artist. My grandmother was an artist, illustrator, and my uncle does a little bit of illustration as a hobby, and I loved doing that as well. So this was one of my hobbies. I would sit with my back to this window, and I would work and I would draw drawings. Now, I remember one night I had the window kind of open. There was a screen and everything, and I distinctly remember feeling watched, and I turned around, and in the corner of my eye, maybe it was my mind's eye, maybe whatever. If any of you have ever seen American Werewolf in London, when you're visited by the ghost of the friend that was mauled by the werewolf, like just this mangled ghoul behind me, like with head trauma, the whole thing. And I got up and I darted out of my room, and I yelled for my parents, and they came in, nothing there. I mean, they went, they checked the yard. They thought maybe someone was going through the neighborhood. Didn't find anything, and I had a pretty consistent diet of macabre media as a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, we had all this great stuff like the VHS boom was going on. So there was a lot of straight to video horror movies. There was a lot of stuff on TV. We had the new Outer Limits, new Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side, Monsters, all these great anthology shows. I mean, if you were growing up in the 1980s, you were just inundated by this wonderful sense of the playfulness of scary movies and the whole culture surrounding it. And a lot of people still try to recapture that sense of fear and wonder that we had in that era. It was a very, very cool time. But was it just me ingesting this media and being kind of projecting that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But there were definitely other things that scared me that did specifically come from films. I remember there was something that I saw that made me think of like hands pushing through walls like it was latex. Maybe that was from like a Nightmare on Elm Street. I think they've done it in a couple of films besides Nightmare on Elm Street. But there, you would have this idea that the wall itself would deform. In Poltergeist, a lot of people talk about the kinder trauma of the clown toy and how it came to life. A lot of kids had a toy they hated, whether it was a doll or whatever. For me, the toy that I didn't like was the Return of the Jedi Rancor from Star Wars. So go on eBay, go on whatever, check that out, look at the Rancor, and see why that might have been like a terrifying toy to just like be watching you from the shelf while you were sleeping. It reminded me a little bit of the film Cat's Eye, which is an anthology film, and in the last segment, a very young Drew Barrymore is um, stalked by like a goblin creature that comes out of the wall, and it gets onto her chest and tries to suck the breath out of her, right? Because there's this old wives' tale about how a cat will do that, but in fact, the cat was rescuing her from this goblin creature. So that was a really cool film, and that along with the poltergeist example solidified the idea that maybe some of your toys might be evil. I mean, that's kind of a kinder trauma. Um, I don't know why kids live in this great fantasy world. The barrier between reality and fantasy is very thin at a certain age. I remember there was one kid that I knew. It was somebody's nephew, like 20 years ago, and we were watching The Terminator, and he was so convinced that the Terminator was real that he called 911 saying that he was watching a snuff film. Like he was saying, like, oh, they brought over this movie of a man and he's being killed and he's doing this and he's doing that, and he was describing it as if this was like some kind of weird underground, like, murder cult movie that had been like recorded on somebody's high 8 camera and like put in the VCR. And so the police were a little bit freaked out over that, right? So the police were like, "Hey, what's really going on?" And they came over and they asked us a bunch of questions, all because it's not necessarily an act of imagination per se. It's not something that this kid fabricated. It's that the kid had a very loose barrier between what is imaginary and what is real. And even to this day, I think a lot of us, especially storytellers, people who write fiction and create other works like I do and my friends do, we look at trying to reconnect to that sensibility of when you were a kid, the possibility of the things that were real, the possibility that your neighbor could be a vampire like Fright Night, the possibility that there are secrets, and then you grow up and you find out that the secrets that they uncover are both somehow more benign in the sense that they're everyday horrors, but at the same time they're much worse because they are everyday horrors, right? So like even though your neighbor might not be a vampire, you know, there are lots of stories about your neighbor being terrible in other ways. Maybe they abuse their elderly relative or whatever, but those are the kinds of things that you have to kind of separate. So you have to bring back the whimsy and fantasy into it to make it a more safe way to explore these things that are in the back of our minds, because sometimes the atrocities that people conduct in their daily life, especially like in the name of you know political ideologies and things of that nature, dehumanization of entire groups of people, well, a lot of like kind of fascist ideology and the way that they enact it, that stuff is really, really scary. And it's a kind of banality of evil. It's a kind of thing that's an everyday evil. And, finding that whimsy, finding that way to explore the supernatural in fiction like a child is a much more healthy way to express a lot of that stuff. So in terms of kinder trauma, I think a lot of people live with it. I've got a little true crime kinder trauma. I'm really bad about going to the dentist. I know a lot of people don't like going to the dentist. I'm actually really bad about going to the dentist. So I went to the dentist a couple of years ago for a checkup, and I went in there and they said, "Oh, when's the last time you were in the dentist?" I said, "Well, probably 30 years because I just haven't been since I was like a kid." I know people will gasp and go like, "Oh, that's horrible." That's the same kind of expression that the dental hygienist had. And she called somebody else and was like, "Oh no, this is going to be a bad one. I'm going to bring another person in. We're going to take a look." And they looked through my mouth and, everything's fine. I have no cavities. I've never had a cavity. I'm, like middle-aged, and I've never had a cavity. And the reason for that, the reason I take such good care of my teeth is because when I was a kid, my father had this dentist that he really liked, and he used to send his patients Garfield cards, like greeting cards for each holiday based on Garfield. And you would look at that and you'd go, "Oh, that's really cute. Nice guy." Dr. Lazalier was his name. My father didn't really like the dentist, but he trusted Dr. Lazalier, and he would go for dental work at Dr. Lazalier's place. And Dr. Lazalier got murdered by his wife, and I guess there was a boyfriend involved, and they just killed him in the office and everything like that. So there was always this kinder trauma that I had, like this deep-seated fear of like something terrible is going to happen if you go to the dentist, because this he was married to his nurse, and she and the lover killed him at the office and then tried to dispose of the body. So that's a kinder trauma, and it impacts the way that you behave as an adult. because it makes you feel very unsafe, right? I know that it's not a rational fear that somebody's going to kind of like come in Terminator style and like, shoot up the dentist's office. But then, that's a superstition. It becomes like maybe something about me and my connection to that thing is going to bring that upon other people. It's not a rational way of thinking, but it's a very human way of thinking. So those are the kinds of things that we can, you know, differentiate that are real kinder trauma versus these sort of like fun kitschy kinder traumas that we all love from experiencing a scary movie or things like that. So coming back to the original Reddit post on this paranormal forum, do I think that this is sort of a combination of two things? Maybe. It could just be everything that I talked about in the beginning, like bicameral mind and fear of the dark and all these other kinds of tropes that you have about the closet. Could it be potentially influenced by something that they saw? Yeah, maybe. I mean, the monster in the closet trope is a pretty consistent trope, but at the same time, we also have to consider that maybe this has some other form of trauma or some other form of manifestation of something real that the mind has chosen to contextualize in the idea of a monster in the closet. So I'm not going to psychoanalyze that. I'm not going to talk about what that could or couldn't be. This person is going to have to figure that out for themselves. But was there really an entity in their closet? That's another possibility. A lot of people believe that there are ghosts. A lot of people believe that there are demons. A lot of people that are Christian believe in the physical manifestation of devils and demons. So it is part of their subjective reality that overlays on our objective reality. So who's really to say? But if you've had any kind of experience with monster in the closet or ghoul of that kind, let us know in the comments. Again, I'm Decker, the Phantom Astronaut. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and I will see you out there.